Today on Let's Talk Climate, we are talking with Michael Robinson, the co-founder of Rust Belt Riders and Tilth Soil, an organization dedicated to transforming regional food systems through the creation of soil blends from food waste. RBR's vision is to build a circular economy that improves food security and combats climate change. I'm Deneen Powell, your host and ecoAmerica's new Path to Positive program director. Hi, Michael.
Hi, Deneen.
Before we dive into our discussion, I just want to say that I live on the west side of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I reside on the unceded land of the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Algonquin tribes. Milwaukee is known in their languages as the gathering place by the waters and the good land or pleasant land. I ask you to join me in acknowledging this region's diverse and vibrant Native culture and peoples, their community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations who show strength and resilience amidst the backdrop of ongoing colonialism and oppression. Let this acknowledgement and all like it demonstrate the commitment to dismantle the ongoing legacies of colonialism. Okay, Michael, we are so glad to have you here with us to talk about the mission of Rust Belt Riders and Tilth Soil. I have to say to everyone, I've known Michael for a while now, and this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm so excited to jump in and get started with this.
Thanks for having me on, Deneen.
It's my pleasure. Okay, so let's dive right in. Michael, I just want to start by in Cleveland, Ohio, you and your partners have created this very unique business and a business model, really, that it's one that marries the very practical aspects of food composting, and it's really vast quantities of food with the big picture need to find solutions to the climate crisis. Can you tell us about your business model? What does your company do, and how do you and your partners, how did you come up with the concept?
Yeah, so we started the company in 2014, and the other co-founder and myself at the time, we had we'd graduated school, and we were kind of figuring out what we were doing after graduating, and at the time we were working in restaurants, and we saw the mass amount of just food scraps coming out of the restaurant that we were working in. And simultaneously, we're working on a community garden in Cleveland. And Cleveland has a big network of community gardens where there's a partnership with the OSU Extension, the Ohio State University Extension, and they provide you with some resources to be able to have a community garden in the different neighborhoods. And oftentimes, the community gardens are on land bank properties, so they're formerly foreclosed houses that have been basically just kind of the houses have been demoed, and there's a thin layer of topsoil on top, and it's a cool way to be able to use those empty plots. But a lot of times the soil on those plots is not in great shape. So
and it's considered to be a brownfield, right? Is that correct?
I don't think I don't think any of the community garden sites are on brownfields, but I know that there are a number of brownfields in the city of Cleveland. I'm not sure about the permitting. I'm not sure that they'd allow for a community garden on a brownfield site. Okay. But a lot of these properties in particular, I don't think would be there. A lot of them are just vacant lots that have been covered with a topsoil, and it's just an empty lot. It was this combination of seeing the poor soil health in the community gardens while also seeing the amount of food scraps that get thrown out at a restaurant. And a lot of those food scraps are not things that you'd be able to, there's the stuff that comes off people's plates, but there's also a lot of food scraps that are just not part of the food that we're eating. So if you're cutting the tops off of the stalks off of corn, or the green parts off of a corn husk, for example, or peels, or the outside part of a squash that you would need. If you're processing a lot of this stuff for a dinner service, it really piles up. So we started to look into food waste as an issue and saw keeping food waste out of the landfills as a really high leverage opportunity to solve a number of different issues that were occurring at once. And the basics of it are, when food waste goes into a landfill, it gets covered up and it doesn't have access to oxygen to break down. And when that happens, we get methane emissions, which is about 25 times the heat trapping capability of CO2. So we're emitting a greenhouse gas. We're contributing to greenhouse gases when we send food waste to landfills. So we started to look at that and think, we have this opportunity to keep food waste out of landfills that will both simultaneously drive down greenhouse gas emissions while also helping to build healthy soils. And when you build healthy soils, you can actually contribute to the carbon sequestration properties of those soils. So with this one solution, we're able to drive down greenhouse gases, pull carbon out of the atmosphere by increasing soil health and soil biodiversity, and ultimately for us, cultivate healthy food for our communities. So try to really reframe food waste, not as a waste stream, but actually a resource. So that's kind of where the general idea for the business came from. And we started at a really small scale. We raised a little bit of money through friends and family, and we bought a bicycle and a bicycle trailer. And we started to haul the food waste about 300 pounds at a time on the back of a bicycle from the restaurant or cafe to the closest community garden. And we've since grown significantly from then. We've got a team of 16 now, and we are serving a couple of the largest hospital networks in the US. So we work with all of their cafeterias. We work with a number of corporate headquarters here in Cleveland, as well as a chain of local grocery stores. So we're no longer on the bicycles. We've had to adapt and move along to trucks. Looking forward to maybe exploring how we might electrify that fleet of trucks one day. But we've gone from a really small scale operation to working more towards providing our county and our region with the opportunity to keep the food waste out of the landfills, but also to use that food waste as a resource, reframing it as a resource to be able to build, to make compost. So we produce compost, and we use that compost to make soil blends. And the soil blends we sell to a number of regenerative agricultural operations, regional farmers, as well as the licensed cannabis operations and farms that we're seeing pop up in Ohio and the surrounding states. So that's kind of the end use of the whole thing. So that's kind of the model in a nutshell, I suppose.
That's an amazing model. Now, tell me, what are your plans for future growth?
Yeah, so currently we just brought on this chain of grocery stores, so we're really excited about that. I think that our model of how we can continue to keep food waste out of landfills would be to partner with potentially other operators in our region that might have larger infrastructure to be able to help work with, for example, a produce terminal has a lot of food waste. And so you need kind of a different set of equipment to be able to do, we're looking at like 20, 30, 40 yard roll-off dumpsters at that point. So I think that's what the next phase of serving really high volume producers of food waste would look like, is partnering with larger trucks. And then on the production end of things, I really like the idea of, we're a member of a network of community composting companies, and our team is really excited about the prospects of what it might look like to find a way to team up with kind of a decentralized network of community solutions to food waste, and helping grow as a national movement is really exciting prospect for growth in our mind.
That's incredible. So, you mentioned, Michael, and you kind of described the process of the impact, but what I want to do is just back up a little bit and ask the question again, just so that there's real clarity around this. People think of climate change and often envision car emissions or factory emissions. The general public may not necessarily understand the connection between actual food waste, which you described as methane gas going into the environment, and climate change. Can you expand on that a little bit, give us a little bit more detail so that we really truly understand what's the connection here and why the work that you're doing is so important towards combating climate change?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think it all really starts with thinking about the food waste as it's a reframing of something that we take for granted as being waste, something that needs to go somewhere. I feel like as a culture generally, we live in a culture of you buy, use, consume it, throw it away. And the idea that it goes away is it's not a thing. It's like things don't go away, they have to go somewhere. And the practice to date has been you dig a big hole, you throw it in the ground, you pile it up, you cover it with dirt, and we move on. And intuitively, that doesn't feel right. I mean, but I think that we're really seeing the ramifications of that method of both consumerism, but also in disposal. And so starting to reframe food waste not as a waste stream, but actually as sunlight that has now been transformed and manifested itself in energy in a form that we can eat is marvelous and wonderful, and also requires a reframing of this is not a waste stream. This is a form of miracle that ought to be cared for and stewarded as one. And so just that kind of basic reframing of what the thing, like what happens here is really core to our work. And I think a lot of that comes from the work that we did in restaurants. So when you're in back of house and you're processing, carrots or whatever it is, you're cracking 100 eggs for a brunch service or something, and you're seeing these eggshells pile up, and it's like, I feel like there's a real reframing of and a sense of purpose in what am I doing with that thing when I'm with it. And one is like, formerly we throw it in the trash and forget about it because it goes to the garbage where it goes away. And the other way of thinking about it is, no, this is actually still a valuable thing. And I am now a valuable member of this system that is making sure that this thing gets back to a place where it's going to facilitate the thriving of human life and our species on the planet, as opposed to contributing to its extinction. Yeah. So it seems like a stretch, but it really is coming down to this reframing of how are we thinking about these things, and not necessarily as waste streams, but rather like really valuable resources, almost like public utilities, and energy in the form of sunlight that we're choosing to dispose of in a way that's exacerbating climate change. So to speak a little bit more pointedly to the question around how do we connect to, how does this manifest itself as the emissions? As I mentioned before, the process by which the material breaks down is a significant contributor. So the material breaks down, the way in which it's decomposed in a landfill is because it does have access to oxygen. It creates what's called an anaerobic environment. Okay. And that nitrogenous material in an anaerobic, this material that has nitrogen in an anaerobic environment, the way in which it breaks down and the organisms that are cultivated in that environment create methane. Okay. And so in order to help make this less bad, you'll see the stacks of flames and landfills, and that's those landfills burning off that methane, converting it into gases that are less bad for the situation maybe, but nonetheless they're giving off methane. And so the idea of capturing that and trying to burn it off is a strategy, but there's also other inefficiencies and emissions involved in a generally wasteful food system. So again, come to maybe a larger zoomed out approach to the work is what we're working on, and this kind of came back to why we thought this is a high leverage solution to work on, is it's really a food system problem as well. It's an infrastructure problem, but it's a climate change problem, but it's a food system problem. Yes. So there's a really cool organization called ReFed that's been doing a lot of research into food waste, and in 2019, ReFed found that 35% of all food in the United States went unsold or uneaten.
Wow, that's a huge number.
35%. And so they calculated that was worth about $408 billion which comes out to 2% of the US GDP. And they also calculated that this is a greenhouse gas footprint. The greenhouse gas footprint of this 35% of wasted food was equivalent to 4% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. And so that can come from everything from machinery that was run to cultivate this food that was never used, machinery that was run to transport food maybe from farm to a food terminal where then it got thrown out, in addition to the methane emissions that are coming out of the
kind of anywhere down that food chain.
Right.
But it's a total of 4% of our carbon emissions here in the US.
Yeah, 4% of US greenhouse gas emissions are estimated to come from the wastefulness of our food system. Yeah. So it seems like an opportunity ripe for a solution, and that's one of the things that REFED's working on. So I'd encourage anyone interested to check out REFED and their report, because they've got a list of solutions and other places for to plug in.
And we will have that link down below. So Michael will give us that information, and we will put it down below. Terrific. Well, I want to thank you for that. And the reason I asked is because, even when I'm talking to my neighbors about this issue, and I'm a composter, and I'm kind of a crazy composter, just trying to dig through the garbage to make sure I don't have anything in there that can't be that can be composted. But I have neighbors who poke around and say, well, what are you doing there? And isn't that going to attract vermin? And isn't it going to do this? And isn't it going to do that? And, if you're composting and you're composting clean and you're doing it the right way, it won't. But educating my neighbor, and I love the idea of talking about the sun generating energy that creates that food, and then we're consuming it. I can't wait to lay that on Gail and see what she thinks. So thank you for that one. That's very good. I want to switch gears a little bit here, mainly because I think our audience is really going to want to know about your relationships and how you took this from, a cart hauling 300 pounds of compost or vegetable food waste to a community garden, into this larger 16-person fleet of trucks, I'm assuming, organization that is working with private sector, corporations, the government. So let's change gears a little bit to talk about that. And over the years, I've known quite a few community organizations across the US working closely with residents and stakeholders to make communities more resilient to climate change. Could you share a little bit about Rust Belt Writers' local partners and the collective impact of those partnerships, particularly as it relates to engaging community and, of course, private sector, corporate partners to act on sustainability and climate action? How are they involved? What do you tell them? How do they support you in this work?
Yeah, we think about our work as community composting. So at the core and from the beginning of our organization's work is being rooted in the community. And I think that, what you had just asked there, we could really take in a whole bunch of different directions. So I'll try to maybe just like break it into pieces and go maybe step by step. But I think I'd like to start with the industries that we've partnered with from the beginning. Sure. I think that the fact that we came from working in Cleveland restaurants, that was a network that we were a part of and a place that we understood. And we were able to introduce this program to a kitchen, back of house, in a way that we were able to relate to the people that would be literally putting the stuff in this new bin. Right. We were able to package it in a way so that we could train back of house staff. And it's not, what we do isn't just an alternative to the landfill. We're really a full-blown training program and onboarding. Like, there's a real kind of mindset shift that has to happen in the back of house in the kitchen to go from like hold on, this is, like we said before, no longer a thing I just toss over here when I'm done, but a resource. And that's a culture change for a kitchen and a cafeteria in a giant hospital, maybe in the back of house at a restaurant, or maybe in the like produce department at a grocery store. So that's part of what we had brought to having this be normalized and integrated into the existing systems, but it was being members of Cleveland's restaurant community, I think, was a big part. Also, some of the larger institutional partners that we have, it's really important for us to think about what is important to them. So we work with university hospitals, for example, or the Cleveland Clinic, and these organizations and others have their own environmental sustainability goals that they're working to achieve. Absolutely. And so we're here to help you achieve those goals. Again, not just an alternative to the landfill. We want to know what if you have goals of curbing greenhouse gas emissions for the organization by a certain amount, we would like to be able to help you do that. And because we are so meticulous about tracking data from our operations, we're able to quantify the impact that an organization has and give that to them in a way that they can then report to anybody that wants to see either how well the greenhouse gas emissions curbing is going, how the environmental sustainability initiatives are moving along, right? Or what the new materials cost per cubic ton of food coming out of the grocery store is costing them. Like, it can really be helpful to CFOs as well. We're just tracking metrics that a lot of garbage or municipal disposal companies don't.
So I want to just reiterate that a part of what you do that really helps others to see the benefit, the impact, is this data tracking. That's really important as a part of your overall work. And for anybody out there who's considering doing this, that should be something that they should also write into their business plan, be thinking about as a part of the work that they're doing when they're pitching it to others and working together. Yeah. Particularly sustainability managers, I would assume, for different corporations and organizations, reminding them that you're going to track that as well, so that collective impact is clearly noted.
Yep, that's right. That's so important, especially to understand, and again, alignment of incentives. Why is this organization interested in doing this? And how can we make sure that not only are they going to be able to pitch this plan at the next board meeting and get it green lit, but have it be successful, stay around, and be able to quantify the impact that the program has had is really, really important.
Very important, extremely. This is amazing information. And I hope everybody has their notebooks out, because I think that this is really, we will capture this and actually publish as a part of, when we publish the actual, this recording, we'll also do a blog where we kind of highlight some of these tips and hints, because I think this is so critical to the work that you're doing and important for anybody else who's considering this. And I want to take it a step further and just ask you a little bit about, like, our research at ecoAmerica shows that there's room to grow for American confidence in our elected officials and to act on climate. And I know that the work that your organization does requires the support and cooperation of state and local officials, but not only their support and cooperation, but also their endorsement and advocacy of your work. RBR has been very successful at cultivating those relationships, Michael. Could you share some of your best practices for working with local elected officials? And what advice would you give to other community-based organizations who may want to start a project in their city or towns? And I'll have to say, I worked for Groundwork Milwaukee for quite a number of years. We worked in the city on community gardens. The one thing that city officials did not like, composting. That was one thing that they did not like very much at all. And I'm just wondering if maybe it was our approach, and we should have thought a little bit harder about how to approach the city officials in a way that benefited them.
Yeah, that's so important. I have to really, one of my colleagues, the other co-founder, Daniel Brown, he was working in community development. And it was one of the things he was doing simultaneous to, prior to when we had started doing this while we were working in the restaurants, and he had a really great understanding of has a really great understanding of the environment in Cleveland, and recognized that we needed to, again, align incentives with the municipality, with the city of Cleveland,
Sure.
with the county, with Cuyahoga County. And so Dan was really intentional about cultivating relationships where it was in this entity's interest that an organization like ours, that our mission was successful, that when we were successful, they were successful, and we helped them do, again, it's really such like in service, like we want to help you do what you're like, get your goals done. And a great example, I think, was one of the best decisions we ever made was we formed an advisory board very, very, very early on in the company's existence. We recognized that in order to take this idea of turning food waste into compost and turn it into an organization that could sustain respectable wages for the team and be able to continue to grow, we had to find people that were smarter than we are, that were specialized in places we weren't, and that really wanted to support us and see us grow. So one of the first advisory board members we found was on the city's Department of Sustainability. So Kristen Hall's been on our advisory board from the very, very beginning. And in this meant that the city of Cleveland always knew what we were up to, what our goals were, and we knew that we were helping the Department of Sustainability accomplish their goals by being successful in our work. So again, aligning those incentives and listening and asking how our organization might be able to help them has been really, really helpful for us. Same thing at the county level. I think just being present and showing up, like that goes a really long way. Staying involved, and then at the community level as well, block club meetings, listening to folks about why it might be that they didn't like the composting happening at the community gardens, and then trying to, just listening and after doing a lot of listening, sharing what might be able to be done differently. But I think, showing up at those meetings and being a sponge was really helpful and went a long way.
So it sounds like really connecting with them so that they understand what you're doing, asking them for their advice and to be present with you. Also finding ways to align your mission with their mission and the work that they're doing currently. And again, looking at maybe it's the city sustainability plan before you even walk through the door, so that you already understand where their priorities are.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. That's a really great example. And those things are out there, and a lot of times I feel like they get put on shelves and not used as much as they ought to be. But and I really Dan's just been really great about knowing maybe who to go to and what kind of work has already done that would be able to set the stage for how we go into a meeting and align what we're doing with what people are already doing too. I think that's the other thing. Sometimes folks get really stoked on an idea like this, and they're like, oh, I have the best new idea, but really, there might be somebody else in your community that's been doing this work for a long time that you've never heard of. And when you show up like you've got the next big thing, and that person is sitting in the meeting, it's really hard to, that relationship's off to a tough start. So I think just, being humble in that, for sure.
Well, I think that those are really great examples. And again, I think it's going to go a long way towards helping our audience understand how to navigate these very complex relationships that are out there and setting them up for success. So I want to ask another question. And this is, we've kind of moved from big picture to local to now I want to ask about the individual. And Michael, we all know that climate change is a big problem that affects everyone. At ecoAmerica, we have developed a series of climate solution guides that offer ideas and information on how individuals and families can be active participants in combating climate change. So would you mind giving our audience a few ideas on decreasing food waste and composting at home? and why.
Yeah.
Even at a small scale, this makes a big difference. Because I think oftentimes most people don't really believe that when we say, hey, if you do these things, it really does help. It does help. And I believe that it truly does, even though it's a very small thing. We're leading by example, which means more people become involved and do the same thing. And that creates greater impact. But why don't you give me some ideas, some hints, some tips here, Michael?
Yeah. So I think if you're at a place where you can compost at home and you can do that in your backyard, I think that the act of that regeneration is fulfilling in and of itself. The idea that you're able to take this thing, you're going to turn it from a banana peel back into soil, and then next year turn that soil into a tomato is awesome. And it doesn't, I don't think, for me at least, doesn't need any other reasons beyond that. I think that's amazing in and of itself, and all the reason to participate in the marvelous process that is
when you
composting.
describe it, it sounds like magic, right? It's just
I mean, it's there's still a lot that we're learning about it. It damn near is, right? It's there's actually a lot that we don't know about these species. So there's a true element of wonder there, and we're learning more and more about the contributions of soil biodiversity, the relationships amongst the microorganisms and the fungal networks in the soils. We could really go all the way into that, and I encourage anybody to check out just mycorrhizal fungi in general, because they're amazing and have some really cool properties. So yeah, I mean, that in and of itself is magical. I think that there's also the cultural shift from a linear system to a cyclical system. I think we need to be thinking in systems generally, right? I think that if we start to introduce a systems mindset to how we're participating in things, we recognize that all of these things are linked together in some way, even though that we've been told that they weren't, or we grew up in a context that tried to tell us that they weren't, and to behave in a particular way. I think we're really starting to, I think it's important that we recognize that these things are all interconnected, and we should act as though we are members of systems because we are. So I think that's another good reason to participate. It's also, what we try to do, we serve residents as well. So we have a residential pickup program where we come to your house, we give you a clean 5-gallon bucket, you fill it with compost, and then we swap your full one out with an empty clean one every week.
nice.
So that's our curbside composting program. And
What does something like that cost for the consumer?
Yeah, so if you pay for the whole year at once, it comes out to $30 a month,
Nice.
or $1 a day, which I think is pretty reasonable. And you also get discounts on all of our soil blends. On top of that, we do give back some compost every year to all of the curbside subscribers. We're currently servicing about 550 households in Cleveland with that program. We come there once a week, and it's a weekly bucket swap out. And so that's, if you can't compost at home, that's a solution that we wanted to provide for our city. Is there are lots that would love to do this if only they had the time. It's also labor intensive, as you know, like you got to get out there and turn the pile. If you're not taking care of your pile and keeping your carbon and nitrogen proper, things get smelly, they stop decomposing like they're supposed to, and you get a wet mess. So we came up with the residential program as a solution to that for folks that might be in a condo or might not have the time or the yard space to compost their own food scraps. I would encourage anybody to reach out to a composting company in their city. There's an amazing network that has been brought together by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. The LSR's Cultivating for Community Composting workshop has been bringing together an amazing group of over 100 composting companies all across the US, many of them in major cities. And
we'll put that down below.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. That's a great link. There's an interactive map where you can search your city or go through the map and find a community composter near you. And a lot of these companies have programs similar to ours. Well, they'll come to your house weekly or bi-weekly and swap out your bucket. And that should make it, our goal there, if we're doing our job well, is it's easy, it's clean, it's simple. We're also able to provide you with personal metrics around your greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And it's also not, again, it's not really that hard to make that change, just to put it in a different container. And the amount of effort that goes into like putting it in this bin instead of that bin, and $1 a day be able to compost the material is, I think, pretty easy. And I think that's a final good reason to give it a shot. Is it's not really that hard.
And not just investing in your household, but also investing in the planet. That $1 a day is going a lot further than we might first believe it to be going, because it's a much bigger picture.
And it contributes to the cultural shift of thinking in systems and in cycles. And there's some like really immediate individual benefits for your household as well. One of the things that I was surprised to see when we started composting at home was all the stuff that stinks when it goes in the garbage can. It's just not in there anymore.
Yeah, right.
All the stuff that smells goes in the compost bin. Sure. And you either keep that outside, or maybe you keep it in your freezer until it's time to throw it in your bucket outside. There are a number of ways to store it until somebody comes to pick it up once a week. But then you're not putting that stuff in your garbage can. So all the stuff in your garbage can, and it depends on if you're in a place that offers recycling or not. But even if not, all the stuff in the garbage can it's not going to get funky or attract flies or anything. So you don't have to take the garbage out as often, not only because it's not filling up as much, but also because it doesn't smell. So there's a lot of like individual conveniences that come along with that as well.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah.
Michael, this has been amazing. This is such a great conversation. And quite frankly, I could go on and on for another hour if we had the time. And, but unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time here. And yet I'm certain, I have to say, I am certain that our conversation today has inspired viewers about progress, community engagement, and local solutions to climate change. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing your powerful vision and story. And we look forward to seeing what's next for Rust Belt Riders. Okay, I want to do a couple of other things here. We're going to, I just want you to know that we will put everything below. We will include also a couple of books on mushrooms and fungi, because there's a couple of really great ones that are out there right now. So I will make sure that that gets on the list as well. Okay, so please engage with us online and use the hashtag Let's Talk Climate, and be sure to subscribe and follow us for the latest thought leadership resources and episodes on climate action and advocacy.
Great. Thank you very much for having me, and thanks a lot for your work with ecoAmerica.
Thank you. And from all of us at ecoAmerica, thank you. Stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.